Hey, Alex, how are you?
Mr. Doran, pleasure as always.
First time using a new software, always going to make mistakes. It has a giant button up there that says go live, so you would assume that you're not live until you press the go live button. But apparently you are live, even though you never pressed the go live button. So
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons why I initially said, do you want to do this on Substack? Because all of this functionality is built into Substack. You don't
You're a
have,
real Substack stan, as the kids say.
I mean, my wife leads recruiting there. I've got a lot of insight into companies. I've been around dozens and dozens of VC-backed high-growth startups, and they're one of the most functional, healthy cultures I've seen. I put them up there with Dropbox. Dropbox was super functional and healthy too.
Yeah.
And you could just tell. And I mean, objectively, as a third party, coming in as like an outside consultant working, like I don't have any skin in the game. I just can compare what I've seen from other companies. And I'd say those are two really world class, and Discord too. Discord we worked with, and they really were world class
Oh,
talent.
they're not unicorns for nothing.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, there's some unicorns out there that there's different ways that we could talk about this in future. I mean, there's different ways that you can drive productivity, right? And
Yeah.
fear and consequence and reward is probably the easiest and the most and I think the most heavily used. But I kind of wrote a Substack article about this. Like, as a leader, I think you really need to think about the emotional wake that you're leaving behind you too.
Oh, man, 1,000%. I mean, what's the famous line by Don Draper in Mad Men where she says, what's the character? I can't remember what the woman's name is in the show. And she says, you never thank me. And he says, that's what the money is
That's what
for.
the money's for.
That's what the money is for. And it's like, wow, okay. Emotional maturity, at least, leaders have kind of gotten to a point where it's more than just, I'm giving you a paycheck or you're getting stock or equity, RSUs, options, grants, whatever. It's like you do need a pat in the back and you do need to like nurture kind of growing talent. And, companies like Discord have done a very, very good job at that.
Yeah.
And the ones that you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, really, generally down to earth people, good people, trying to do really good work. Not a lot of politics. To me, politics is like it's like cancer within a company. So it's pretty interesting to see. Even if you listen to the Brian Chesky interview with Lenny last year on his
So good.
podcast, right? Like,
Yeah.
like about how essentially he learned what I saw coming up working in big baby boomer companies, that when they get too big they start to form divisions, and then you get these fiefdom and these like territorial wars between divisions, and you have a lot of directors and people above it who are working towards their short-term goals, which means their bonuses, but they're not really working towards like the long-term best interest of the business. And it is also
Yeah.
ultimately becomes a limiting factor to these businesses when they get too big. And so that's why he realized they hadn't do any product updates for years that he could visibly see, and got rid of a bunch of product managers and just reorganized how the company worked. So it all just shows how business is evolving, right?
1,000%.
Yeah.
1,000%.
So if you're just joining us, I guess welcome to Talent Grind Live. I'm Michael Doran. I'm the founder of TeamSource. On board, we've got Alex Mann, who leads go-to-market for AI. And this is our first Talent Grind Live. I think the topic we settled on was AI doomerism and recruiting. All I'm seeing in my LinkedIn feed right now are people who are building products or selling services telling people that AI is here and they're going to be taking your job, right? So, Alex, what do you think about that?
Oh, I mean, it's about time, no? I think it's a real secular shift happening in talent and acquisition now, and it's honestly a very exciting time. If you're a candidate, it's exciting, and if you're a recruiter, if you're on the talent side, it's super exciting. I think like the scope and the amount of for those that can take advantage today of the opportunities that are there to like optimize or improve efficiency in your workflows will stand to get such a strong edge. Like honestly, I think AI is just a tool to give people edge. It's not going to replace anyone. It's just going to give people edge.
Yeah, I mean, just taking a look at how I've changed my own recruiting process. So I actually run TeamSource. We're composed of a couple of different things. We've got a services business, which pays our bills. And at the same time, we're building a software platform where we're trying to unlock a lot of enterprise technology that recruiters only get access to with the systems that their companies buy them, and give people systems that they can use across their career. And just recently this year with a client where I'm pretty much a fractional recruiting leader, I decided I need to use AI. And so I started using 3 or 4 different AI systems to take notes because I wanted a lot of redundancies. I was doing something different. I had kind of worked my way up to the point where I could transcribe what someone was saying to me into the ATS while I was interviewing them. So like 90 to 100 words per minute, right? And so just
Yeah,
for
awesome.
framework, like when I was at Bolt, which was the last time I was heavy down, taking a really heavy rec load, I was doing anywhere from 35 to 40 phone screens a week. And I was reaching out to about 200 to 300 people a week with personalized messaging. And I created a super strong flywheel that got to the point where we had like way more volume coming in than we even had capacity to kind of meet it. Right. And so now I decided to incorporate AI. I'm using Otter. I'm experimenting with Ellie. I've used MetaView. I've used a lot of them in the past. What the big difference for me now is that I'm no longer heads down transcribing. Right. Like I'm up,
Yeah.
I'm sitting, I'm engaged in the conversation, I'm listening, I'm looking at the resume, I'm thinking, I'm like just following in the scorecard over. I put an X in each text field as I'm talking to the person. I try to give them the best candidate experience I can because I've been doing a lot of executive recruiting lately, and so it's just much more involved. There's a lot more pitching and selling involved, and I would say that AI has taken away 80 to 90% of the stress that I had.
But you know what? It's interesting you say that because it's like it's also like a sliver. Like what you're mentioning, what we're talking about here is like the AI note taking and summary
Yeah,
part
just one
of
sliver,
it's only
one
a
sliver.
sliver of the actual like spectrum of recruiting from the sourcing, the vetting, the scheduling, the interviewing, the offer, the onboarding, the activation. You know, if you
Yeah,
think about it like that, every single that call note taking, the Ellie kind of part of that spectrum is a small sliver
yeah,
where like you found huge optimization gains there. Like you're like, oh, I can the workload that I used to carry, I don't need to, just in that small sliver.
right.
So you could imagine what it's like, okay, where's AI going to play in sourcing? Where's it going to play in the
Or combining
scheduling, in
everything
the vetting?
together and automating that nitty-gritty work that everybody's spending 80% of their time today,
Yeah.
like doing all this nitty-gritty work, sourcing talent, putting it into the right areas, verifying emails if you're good and want to keep your company bounce rate down. Uh, Personalizing the messaging, right? Like all these things that my services business do so that we can have a really low bounce rate, so that, making sure that you're really on target in your sourcing your outreach, that you're only reaching people who like the message is going to compel. Because I've seen, the volume game in the past that doesn't work is when you're kind of spraying every Tom, Dick, and Harry within the industry and you get a lot of response in, but you have to spend like 80 to 90% of your time kind of filtering out people who weren't like a sourcing match in the first place. So
But
it's
you
part of
know,
the tight process, and then you
totally.
add the AI recruiting interview in, like you can automate it and create your own little flywheel pretty easily now.
Nail on the head. And I think that's what I mean by like giving edge,
Yeah,
where it's like you've got that one sliver that you were articulating here, but like if you're able to stitch these together, or rather get like an understanding of like, okay, what are the parts in my sort of talent acquisition funnel that I can optimize with sort of AI tools, have them talking to each other, the
yeah,
amount of time you can save to do more like strategic work. Like if you like you mentioned doing more executive recruiting and it's a lot of networking, it's a lot of talking, it's a lot of relationships. It's probably that's really like coded language for like I need to get as much information as I possibly can on this candidate. You know what I mean?
mm,
So it's like if you're able to design a process that helps you like spend more time learning about somebody and less time manually sending emails or scheduling interviews
well, if I
or
could be,
taking notes. Okay. But actually, I think you said something interesting there as well, which is like you posted the job on LinkedIn. Did you
mm,
get a flood of applications the second you put it out there?
yeah, because we put a promotion budget in, so
Yeah.
you got to kind of pay to play. But I mean, honestly, it brought a lot of applicants in. But
So you have to
and
triage that.
LinkedIn sent me an update and said this many people saw it, but 0 people applied. But yet I know I've gotten lots of applicants. I could run a report in their greenhouse and see exactly how many came, but like they're not really giving me like really good data to justify why I just spent $2,000. And he asked if I
No.
wanted to like re-up the amount. And Like I've already gotten quite a bit out of it. So why would I, you know?
I mean, LinkedIn could be its own episode or its own conversation. Like the opacity, yeah, we're just taking note. The opacity in which their product,
Well, it fits
all of
into
their
our theme
products.
today, though, because AI doomerism is AI here and is it going to replace recruiters, right? So there are a number of voices on LinkedIn right now who are saying this. I've got a good friend who's an AI doomer, but from my perspective, looking at how something like Ellie has like taken 90% of the stress away from my work. I think AI is going to enable a lot more of us to do a lot more in the future. And then AI is going to
But
enable a lot more people to build businesses. So like instead of having 50,000 person businesses, we'll have 50,000 more 1,000 person businesses.
I would actually agree with you on that. Instead of 50,000 people business, it might be 50,000, 1,000 people businesses. It's a real mouthful to say, but
Yeah.
it's interesting. Did I say that right? Well, you know what's interesting? I had a chat with somebody a few months ago on this very topic, and they told me that they were going to pass on a tool like Ellie.
Mm.
And I was like, I don't want to be like, oh, we're a slam dunk of a product, but it's like, if you're not going to buy it, I'm like, I'm very curious as to like why, if it's not to go to an alternative tool. And I was told that, we have a bunch of new junior recruiters joining our company, and we want our recruiters to work. And I was like, okay. But like when I think about that, I'm like, all these junior recruiters, entry level recruiters, people getting into the business for the first time, it's likely they're all very adept at ChatGPT anyway. So like
Yeah.
they're probably going to they're going to use a private version of their own video recorder, and they're going to take that transcript and put it into ChatGPT anyway to do the notes. And I think about that in the sense that like the way the job of a recruiter is going to change, not that we're going to lose recruiters doing the job,
Mm.
just like in marketing, you know, I remember when Instagram didn't have ads. And now, I mean, the platform is just ads, but how that was a sea change for the way people bought digital media because people were buying like paid search ads really as one of the only forms of digital ads you could buy. And there was a bunch of programmatic sort of ads at the time, and that was better, and they're all shit. And now it's like, okay, there's like a whole new sea change in terms of how you can reach people with better data. So, like, it's not like people became Instagram marketers. They were still marketers. It's just another way of doing their job and doing it
Yeah.
more effectively.
Another
And
channel to
I
arbitrage.
yeah, and I just think like, like right now, and like if you were to play back this video of us right now in 5 years' time, it would sound like it's like we're trying to explain to people what a time like apps were like in
Why wouldn't you just have
2012.
your agent do it all for you?
Yeah, like I think
Your
like,
personal
there's
data agent who goes out and does all the busy work for you.
totally. I mean, if that's the thing, I think it's
Yeah.
like the doomerism is like people have this vision, I think, of like literally sitting in front of an avatar for a screen.
Yeah.
And I really don't think any brand would really want to put that in front of any type of first round screen that I honestly, maybe there will be like, but I mean, secularly, I
Maybe
just
it's just
don't
a
see
little
that.
ball that's gonna talk in the corner.
Yeah, like the ChatGPT ad there, yeah, from a Super Bowl. I mean, I don't get it. I don't see it. Whereas, like, I do see like, whoa, my God, man, come on! Like, how even as basic as understanding ChatGPT has changed the way people have worked, or will
Yeah.
change the way people work, and
Yeah.
that's just the most basic interface that anybody possibly has. So the possibilities for like optimizing your job are kind of endless. And like, as someone like me who's not a recruiter, for example, but like I am somebody who sells to recruiters, been
Yeah.
said like for 3, 4 years now, and I'm in these conversations all the time. I'm like, it's not the most flush with cash department that exists in the
No,
org.
it's a cost center, and they let
I'm
us
coming
know
from
it's a
sales and
cost
marketing.
center every second, right?
Yeah, humans are seen as a line and a profit and loss,
Yep.
and so with that comes an expectation on recruiters, HR, talent teams to do more with less.
Right.
So if you're pressured to do more with less, surely that should be like an inspiration to figure out where are the areas that I can optimize within my workflow that have AI opportunity that
Mm.
I can get ahead and thus find that edge. Like that's how I think like recruiters should be thinking. you know, who am I
Yeah.
to tell them?
Well, like, kind of like it's what I'm trying to build toward with my platform, which is centered around the concept that it's your career, it should be your data. You should be allowed to keep your non-confidential, non-proprietary data, like all of the talent sourcing you do in the projects and the folders, and maybe even all the initial email and outreach that you send, because you're sending it out to thousands of people. Like, but that data goes into these system of record stores at companies, and not many companies actually do much with it, right? It's kind of where
Could
data
you
goes.
imagine?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, kind of continuing, around to the AI doomer conversation, there's companies out there like moonhub.ai, and they're going to create the perfect 5-stage AI recruiter that's going to replace it. But and no disrespect to what they're doing, but the first thing they did was build a recruiting services business, right? Because they've got to learn the intricacies of recruiting. And the reason why I decided to build in the space is I actually talked to who's now the CPO of Roblox. His name is Casey Arvin. He built all of the tools at Facebook during their early days. And I asked him when machine learning AI was going to replace the recruiting coordinator, because that's the objectively the most transactional role within a talent organization. And he's like, Michael, it's not about that. It's not about replacing that recruiting coordinator. It's about allowing them to do 50 times more than what they can do today with like 90% less stress.
1,000%.
Yeah. And
I,
I mean, he told me that back in like 2012, I think. Like, the guy's a genius. Like
yeah.
follow him on LinkedIn, because he's constantly building with AI tools, and he's talking about it, and he's building Roblox into being a very strong organization. But it really resonated with me that ultimately, we've kind of had this Web 2.0 period, which is fraying society and is isolating people into all these different little isolated bubbles, and something like, you know taking your data with you, using AI tools like Ellie, spending more of your time building relationships is how we can repair a lot of that damage, right? Like, getting out of yelling at each other in LinkedIn comments. And then, more people starting to do live, more people starting to get people out and, into the spaces where we are, to get us talking with each other again.
I would say, yeah, like, I mean, look, at the end of the day, like, recruiting is kind of like sales. Like, you need to build relationships
Kind
with
of.
great people, and you need
Yeah.
to place people, like, you need to close deals,
Right.
And so, of course, there can be a very transactional picture of recruiting, because
It's
by its
easier
very,
than sales.
well,
Sales is much harder.
well, I think,
You're actually trying to get money out of people, it's one thing. You're trying to give someone a job and get them into a company, it's more of like a meeting of minds. It's like a service you're performing for both individuals.
I think that's fair. But I think, like, I think, like, the recruiting industry hasn't really had a shakeup in a while. Like, if you think about it, like, what was the last shakeup in recruiting? ATS, LinkedIn, like, talent solutions. You
Probably
know what I mean? Like,
LinkedIn and ATS and things like that.
yeah, like, I
Yeah.
mean, and then the ATSs that people are using or have been using for the last, like, 10 years or so are all shite. Like, I mean, they're all like, people could go on about, like, oh, they're good or not, but I mean, like,
I
fundamentally,
think
like,
Ashby's probably the best in class right now, maybe?
yeah, because it's new, but,
Right.
like,
It's
in the
new.
sense that, like, you wanna compare it to Salesforce or HubSpot. But I will say, like, what I think holds back a lot of ATSs is, like, the actual data analytics infrastructure within
Yeah.
them is so poor,
Yeah.
and that goes across all of them, and no disrespect to any of them, but
Yeah.
I'm, like, in my head, if I was, like, if you look at something like HubSpot, okay, which, again, has been around a while, but my god, do they go out of their way to give you 6 out of 10 for every single product that they have on their service. So when you sign up, it's like, yeah, that's good analytics, that's good integrations, but they have them all enough that you're locked in. Whereas I find with, like, an ATS, like, I mean, ask anyone who's, like, tried to change ATSs. I mean, people are, like, moving the data from one to the other, extracting the data. I find them so cumbersome because it's like there's a
Because
million
an
and one.
ATS is just a feature in an enterprise information management system that hasn't been built yet, bro.
1,000%. But this is the moat, and this.
There's a divide coming, which I saw 6 years ago, and like, what I didn't take VC investment in my business. I bootstrapped the thing because I saw ultimately SaaS is the commoditization problem. It's going to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper,
Yeah,
right?
and
And
you
at a
can imagine
certain
with
point,
AI then,
yeah,
you
at a
know?
certain point, now that we're in the AI era, like, I just think there's one concept I want people to understand is that data is the new oil. Like, your data is valuable. Like, you need to retain as much of your data as possible, because that's going to make you a better professional over time. It's going to allow you to work smarter over time. It's going to allow you to work less on the areas that are just kind of mind-numbingly, and more in the more, the better areas, right? Like,
But you strike a really good point here, which I think I heard maybe on LinkedIn, or so I read this somewhere and I thought it was really fascinating, which is like, if you think about like a recruiting firm and you think about yourself, Michael, okay, you
yeah,
might have interviewed over your time as a sort of fractional 10,000 people individually,
yeah,
20,000.
yeah. I've got to be over 20,000 people at this point.
Okay, so let's say, and you imagine you had that data at your fingertips today to say how many CEOs, how many chief product officers, how many chief marketing officers, what was the salary ranges over time, what were the locations, what were the job needs then to now, and be able to use an AI to rip through all of that to be able to give you insight. Now, could you imagine just the volume of data? I think people forget how many interviews you actually do in your, like, and the amount of data that you have on people. Or like, if you knew you had the true insight into like how a chief marketing officer should be paid, what's the trend behind that sort of person, and you have all this proprietary data,
Yeah.
that's what separates you from
Yeah,
like
and that's what the biggest thing that I've been telling people more recently. If you look at the recruiting eras, you start with the Mad Men era, which is about Rolodexes and relationships.
yeah.
And everybody who's on this live probably is grown up during the client server internet cloud era, right? Where now all of a sudden we had the world open up to us, that we could contact everybody, and everybody turned into spam machines. But now we're really, now that we're into the AI era, we need to go back to the relationship developing, but using AI tools to augment us so that we can do 100 times what people could have done in the past,
Which is the opposite of doomerism.
which
You
is the opposite
know,
of doomerism.
if I was like, if I like, I mean, like, you're a recruiter. I mean, this is an opportunity to be better. This is an opportunity to be a better
I
operator.
spend no time doing grunt work, and all my time just talking to amazing. I talked to a dude who was the showrunner for Tangled yesterday, right? And who like was there at Disney on the day that they went from manual animation to digital animation. And I got to
Oh
dive
wow.
into that dude's brain and scrape it out, and learn as much as I can. And that's the best part of being a recruiter. And why I also posit that I think the recruiting leaders I think the business leaders of the future need to come out of recruiting. They traditionally come out of sales and they come out of finance. And out in Silicon Valley, they come out of engineering, but rarely do they actually come out of recruiting. But we're the ones who are inside the businesses. We're the ones who's building them. We know all the people. We know how all the pieces fit. And we have to be legally compliant because we're part of HR. It makes more sense to have a CEO be from recruiting.
Do you think that there's just like, yeah, on that actually, it's just like, you think there's like an articulation problem within recruiting and talent acquisition?
Wrote that if HR is the ugly redheaded stepchild, we're its mutant twin offspring that nobody wants to look at. Like, I mean, recruiting is such a tough profession. When everything's going right, you're doing your job. And when when you're not filling positions and things are going wrong, the entire company is going to fail because of you, because you didn't get the talent in here that we needed. And
Sounds like sales.
you get paid 30 to 40% less than sales. But the only benefit is that when we hit our hiring goals, they don't immediately like double them the next quarter. So that's
Yeah.
why I think salespeople are entitled to that 30% bump from recruiters and comp.
Yeah, no. I mean, God, I mean, it is a stressful kind of environment. I mean, when you articulate it like that, like, the business might not make it if we don't hire these people, is like, if that's not a warning shot to people to remind themselves that, like, yeah, recruiters are important. I
But at the
don't
same
know
time,
what
like, all of my career, I never had somebody come to me and say, listen, your activity is supporting this OKR, which is supporting this OKR. And this is our 90% strategic plan for this year. And if you're the base of that, and if you don't find that talent, this whole plan is going to wither on a vein. I never had anybody come and explain that to me that way. It was more like, these are the jobs, contact the hiring managers, fill them right away, get people in.
Yeah, transactional, not
Transactional,
strategic.
not strategic. Yet at the same time, we're really one of the most strategic areas of a corporation. That's why I give away people a talent frameworks. If anyone needs one, I can give it to you. I think that if you're going to be building an organization, you need to build a talent framework to support it, right? In order to who you need, what level you need, what the skills are, where they come from, so the recruiting and the hiring manager can get on target as quickly as possible.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, it's kind of like when you picture it that way. And there's a comment here from Alicia Straw there, very much like articulating it there. Is like if we don't hire enough nurses, like the beds are closed and patients suffer. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
people are suffering because you can't get the talent in the door to go out and service them because they can't leave their house.
Yeah, which is like kind of remarkable. And I think like again, like I think recruiters need to just remind themselves of that. Like that is like super important, like as in because if you get caught in this transactional hiring manager needs jobs filled, go fill them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's you're one step away from being automated away. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
for
Like that's
sure.
what that looks like versus like if you want to be a strategic partner to the business, understanding the business like outcomes of your work. I think that like will give you that edge again. And if you have AI, it's like it just builds your edge.
And what it's doing is it's taking the fatigue from the job away so that you can be happier, you can be more productive. I mean, there are people who like maintaining systems and just keeping the cogs moving, but it's usually because like their interests lie in somewhere else and they're using that as their job. I mean, I think the AI is going to take that away.
The kind of cog, kind of balancing the operations kind of side of
Yeah,
things.
and if you check out like I can't remember them now. First round has got a really good blog post that's like 6 or 7 years old, and it's from a woman who's a recruiting leader, and it was like the difference between rock stars and superstars. And essentially, rock stars are people who are really good at their job, but they just like coming in and keeping the wheels moving.
I know the article you're talking about.
Oh
Is this
yeah,
was
and
this
with the
was this Molly
superstars are
Graham?
like visionaries. They're people who can see things in new ways, who can build structure. They're the 0 to 1 people. And the problem is when you take a superstar and you try to put them into a rock star job, which is basically my career.
Are you
That's why I
are
built
you
a
saying
really
you're
good
the rock
recruiting
star,
process
or are
because
you
I got tired
saying
of being yelled at.
yeah? Well, no, I think it's fair. I mean, that's why you're more entrepreneurial. You know what I mean? Like some people
Yeah,
are
I
born for
like building.
systems and some people are born for building. I mean, it's just the nature of like, I guess, humanity. But I think like in the context of like scaling a hiring or talent,
There's a place
that's
for
her.
both. There's a place for
Yeah.
both. It's understanding what your place is.
Amen to that. I agree with that. I agree with that.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, like I mean, look at the end of the day, like I mean, what we're talking about isn't really rocket science as well.
yeah.
And like we've kind of evolved this from doomerism of AI. And in reality, I think you and I are both aligned that like, hey, like I mean, I might not be a recruiter myself, but in this space, and I'm kind of very much on this sort of like,
Yeah.
there's no doom here. It's just optimize your workflow. And it's like everything you're telling me, Michael, here in this chat is like what I always think about for sales and marketing departments in the first place. What's your framework for growth? How are you
Yep.
going to deliver results for the business outcomes? It's no different
Yep.
in talent acquisition. And, to use that phrase from AA, you got to keep your side of the street clean as well.
Mm.
Like you've got to basically like, what can you do in your role?
You're looking
You
for
know,
process improvements, right? Like I've been working with this client for 5 years and we got the system in place, but I'm tweaking it. I'm renaming things. I'm making it more streamlined so that people who don't interview all the time and jump in can just get where they need to be, put the data where they need to with the maximum of efficiency, with the minimum of the mental stress for them. Right. Because like one thing I think is good for all recruiters to keep in mind is that it's 100% of your job and it's like 5 to 10 of everybody else's.
yes, exactly that.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you temper your own urgency?
Yeah. Well, how do you smooth things out?
Yeah.
Like I said, I became so good at recruiting processes because I was a contractor and I didn't have job security and I had a family that I needed to support. And I got tired of being brought into those meetings where we need to have a conversation about how you're not meeting performance expectations. It's like, let me figure out every single mistake I could possibly make and build a process around that so I never ever make those mistakes. And then it's just like a machine. And then the better the machine I build and the tighter I make it, the less input of my time. Right. So that's why I do
Yeah.
fractional recruiting leadership as well, because I can run a business with, maybe 20 to 30% of my time a week. I spread my load across my team and I use technology
Totally.
to fulfill.
And I was just going to say, and you arbitrage even more time with AI tools now and systems design, like from ingesting resume all the way to job offer. Like, you've obviously
Yeah.
analyzed your spectrum there and be like, where are the optimizations? You've got the flow down. So you could onboard multiple clients, I presume, and just have that same process that filters it through,
Yeah,
you
and
know?
Alicia
And I,
makes a good point that smaller institutions are afraid of AI. I just tried to help with recruiting a generative AI recruiting interview tool that did full recruiting phone interviews
oh,
last
wow.
year. They got sold, unfortunately, but I tried to bring them to market. And I went to multiple conferences. I hit up executives at all these major corporations, and I heard nothing back. And I talked to a few people, and they're essentially there's a lot of let's look and see what the other guy does before we do something. And the enterprise is taking its time with AI right now for everybody. So what's happening is that they're going to scale, and other companies, they're taking all their data and they're building their own LLMs. And then their employees are only going to be able to use their LLM. And
Which
so
is
all
going to be
that
such a
building is
fail.
happening right now.
I actually think that's going to be a big fail for a lot of orgs if they think about going building their own. If you're a giant recruiting firm, you're not a tech company. Do you know what I mean? And like you've only got so many even if you're a $1 billion firm, you'll be like, let's say you
It'll
do
be
over 100
interesting.
million in revenue.
But who's got the
They're not
advantage?
tech
People
companies.
who let their employees use the best AI systems on the market, or people
Yeah.
who put them into a closed garden?
Yeah, I'm skeptical of it. Like, honestly, I think there's so many tools out there. And I do think this point that Alicia has mentioned as well, about like, smaller institutions. As a seller of a product like this, I kind of see it the other way around. Like, the larger the org, the more I have to deal with SOC 2 and compliance questions.
Yep.
Whereas with smaller, it's like, the way I think about it is, like, smaller firms, smaller companies, they're like, we don't know enough about AI, but we know we need to be at the party.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? It's like they're kind of outside the bar looking, like, we know it exists. I think enough people in space have kind of heard of talent intelligence at this stage. I've been to enough conferences, I've been in enough webinars that they kind of get it. But I think, like, I find from a selling perspective that it's a lot easier to onboard companies that have 3, 4, 5 recruiters than it is larger institutions where I have to have larger conversations about,
Yeah, for sure.
compliance and regs and all that kind of stuff.
They want to
But
be
like,
efficient. Their speed is their
yeah,
advantage.
and this is the thing. And I think to answer Alicia's question, though, I think, like, how do you make leadership understand? How do you make leadership understand that this is not a replacement but a resource? I would honestly, the way I pitch like AI products, and this is the second AI company I've been at, is like, it's like saving time and efficiency for you. Like, if you think about the fact that you do an interview, okay, and it takes 30 minutes to do an interview, like, if you're spending 15, 20 minutes in a note afterwards, like, to get your notes together, well, imagine that you're getting that back in 2 minutes instead. Like, that 18 minutes
Yeah.
matters, and then multiply that by 10, 15. Michael, were you saying you were doing 40 calls a week? So
Yeah,
you
we're
could
doing 20
imagine,
calls a week.
because you could imagine the amount of
But that was
time.
pre-AI, bro.
Yeah. So I think it's just a question of, like, not talking about it as an AI per se, but what is the impact of the product going to have on your workflow?
Yeah. And Alicia,
That
in regards to your question here, I think that maybe what you don't see is the opportunity that's in front of you for like you to, I don't know if they don't allow you any access. Do they have the network so locked down that you can't just open a tab and go to your own paid Claude or Chat GPT and just start using that yourself? I think if you could really show them by perfecting your work and delivering such a better quality of work at a better quantity, and you could just say, hey, listen, this is what I'm doing, and it's really efficient. I think we need to spread this across our organization because it's going to allow us to be more efficient and not have to hire more people, right? Because I worked on a project once for Aon Hewitt where we had to hire 500 people to become licensed life insurance agents in 6 months. And we had to overhire by 30% because we knew people weren't going to pass the licensing process with the state of Illinois. And it was like all hands on deck. We were going to churches, we were going to community centers, we were having big hiring events where we were bringing executives in, you know? And nowadays, I think I could probably find an AI tool and have maybe a 4-person team, and we could have handled that load without any stress or urgency. And I think that that's a good illustration of the power that AI is going to have, just allowing so many people to do so much more. Yeah,
Yeah, from the amount of recruiters I speak to on my calls, that happens all the time. That
yeah.
everyone
So I would think that in
literally,
that instance, you just want to use it on a sly
yeah.
and just show them how good you are, and then look for another job. And go to a company
Spicy,
that's gonna be have a little bit
spicy.
more flexible attitude towards you. Like, listen, I really want to use I believe in AI and where it's going and the impact it can have on me as a recruiter. And I'm feeling limited because I'm not being allowed to explore that. Like that would be music to a startup's ears.
1,000%. I mean, what you just said there is like so true. I mean, like whether companies are ready to admit it or not, or ready for the change, the secular change has happened.
Yeah, yeah,
And I mean, like, there's so much learning on LinkedIn. I mean, and not that I want to talk about LinkedIn learning, the product, but more like, I love that people are sharing all these workflow automatizations all the
yeah,
time. Like, I'm constantly testing random tools. I'm here just to figure out how do I make my life easier? How do I make my job faster? How do I
yeah.
make it more efficient? And I think there you go. Like, yeah, we don't get it either, Ellis. Yeah, I mean, that's what we sell. We sell
Yeah,
AI.
listen, that's exactly it. I mean, you need to understand, when I was doing 100 words a minute, I still was kind of looking down. I was like looking up concepts. I was grabbing names. I was spending 60% of my attention doing input for telephone interviews and 40% attention on candidates. And now I'm literally 95% attention on candidates and 5% monitoring. I've got the scorecard here. I've got the resume here. I've got the VC right here. I've got Slack over here. Right. And I'm just kind of monitoring data. And this is the future, and it's less stressful, and you can do 10 to 20 times more than you can do today.
Yeah, I mean, and that is music to businesses' ears. You know what I mean? Like, how much more efficiency? Remember when mindfulness was a thing in corporate America? I think
Yeah,
we've all kind of
it
forgotten
should
about that.
still be.
Yeah, which it should be, but it's like wringing that extra bit of performance out of people. At least now AI can tangibly do it. You know what I mean? I'm very cynical
Yeah,
about like mindfulness in the office. I was always very cynical about it. I was like, like this is just them trying to eke more performance out of me. But at least this way, it's like, how could
yeah. I
AI
was at
not give you?
Google. I saw the full Google machine. I've got a degree in human development. I study
Yeah,
this stuff. I look at all the different ways to evaluate and assess people. And like Google were genius at just making you feel special and making you want to work for them forever.
yeah, and I mean it's awesome. And I mean, like, look, I mean, I've gotten so much value from AI over the last 2 years
Yeah,
from marketing and sales perspective. I mean, it has changed the trajectory of my career. The
yeah.
way I look at outreach, how do I communicate with people? How do I actually close deals? How do I close sales? The way I did business 2 years ago to even where I am now, I'm 36 years old. Like, I've been in my career now since 2012, say, okay?
Yeah.
And so, like, at the beginning was apps, meh, whatever. Remember apps? And
Yeah.
now it's like, really, to be honest, this is the thing that has really changed how I do my job. And I'm so much more confident now. I'm not going to be replaced by AI. I don't think there's anything to have any doom and gloom about. I think, it'll give an edge. There might be people that will get left behind for sure. Like, I mean, if you're not
Oh yeah.
using AI tools to make you better at your job, like people who are adept at using it, like we were talking offline just before we came on, like people talk about like ChatGPT and like, oh, you need to understand Boolean, and it's like, nah, man,
Yeah.
just learn how to prompt, like
Yeah.
start at
Learn how to
prompting, get
prompt.
better at that.
Like I
Like,
just did it the other day. Like we're working with a company that's in aerospace, and I used to be a pilot, and I used to jump out of airplanes too. So I know a lot about, and so I kind of worked with Claude, and I came up with a target list of 237 companies that were building either airplanes or equipment or avionics that had FAA certification in general aviation, commercial aviation, and military aviation. And it's like, boom, there's the top of our funnel. Go to
yeah.
work. Right, right, right. And I never would have been able to do that before. I would have been like scouring the internet for hours, like trying to put together a comprehensive list of all those different companies that I just
I'm,
did in a 15, 20-minute meeting.
which is unbelievable. And it's like, I guess the thing is like, what will it take for somebody, say, listening here to get to where you are today as a recruiter? Not in terms of like your experience, but in terms of your application of AI. Like, where are you
Read a
suggesting
lot.
people start?
Like I
Like,
think
where would you say someone should just start? Like, if I said to you, what tool would you recommend another recruiter right now to go if they haven't done anything or they're really just dipping their toe? Man, just go do this. Like, what would it be?
I think maybe just buying Claude.ai. Pay $20 a month, right? Because Claude allows you to build projects. So you can create a project for your work. You can create a project for your home. You can create a project for your side hustle. And then in each of those projects, you can upload all the documents. So if like your company is using Word, right? And they send it to you as an attachment, so it's in your computer, right? You would be able to take that Word document right into the project, and then the Claude would be able to reference that, right? So you could put all of your resumes in there. You could put all of your intake notes into there. You could put all of the company information. You could literally, scrape the company website, grab all the data, put it into a Google Doc or a Word doc, download it, put it into there, and then you could ask questions from that project. You could take your interview notes if you're putting them into just a regular form or something, like grab a copy of them, put them in there and transcribe it, answer these questions for me, and start to operate the way that like I'm operating today. And then just grabbing that information, because if they're not allowing you to use AI, then that means that they're doing the old ways, which is Word attachments, which is not really secure.
No, and it's just not practical.
It's not practical. It's not.
And so you would say Claude. I find it fascinating.
I like Claude.
I'd be like,
writing is really good. Also, I agree with Anthropic's attitude towards AI safety. I think they're an important voice in the space.
Elaborate. For me, that's like, what is their point of view?
They're building their AI with a focus on safety.
Yeah.
And they're building it to be a comprehensive, good partner with you. They're not taking this like growth at all cost, like keep up with the competitors. I really personally think OpenAI is going to go the Microsoft way, which is the close government partner.
Yeah.
Like they've already got a former head of the NSA that's on their board, and they're now part of the whole Supergate type of thing.
Yeah,
I think Claude and Anthropic are going to be an independent entity where a lot of people can successfully create business. I wish that they had like a 5 million input.
The limit you're getting for what you.
We're so close to essentially being able to take our entire back end and put it into an AI in a project, and have the AI tell us how to implement the features that we want. And at some point, they're going to be able to tie that into Git.
Yeah,
it's all coming, right? And so that means that like you don't need a team of 8 engineers. You need like 2.
Well, I mean, that kind of goes back to the topic of the whole point of this conversation.
Yeah, which means more people can get their ideas out of their head and into the world without having to be technical themselves.
Which I think, goes back to that amazing phrase you said, there's not going to be 1,000, 50,000 people businesses. There's going to be 50,000, 1,000 people businesses. Yeah. I think our reframing is important here to remember that, like, organizations might not be as big going forward, but there'll certainly be more organizations doing more things. Again, not taking the human out of AI, just augmenting, just making you better at your job.
Humans, right?
Yeah. It's making you better at your job.
More humans without people having to turn themselves into like influencers in their space.
Like everybody wants don't even. That. That's like that's a topic for an episode. LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Talent influencers on LinkedIn.
Well, we're 15 minutes over, so I think we can probably wrap this up. Alex, thank you so much. This has been a very interesting conversation.
It's been great.
I'm looking forward to doing this more. We're going to do this once a week, everybody. We'll do it on Tuesday. Let us know if you have any feedback. Feel free to put up any questions that you have for us in the comment section of the post that we put up. And I just really appreciate everybody coming out to watch today. Have a great day, Alex.
Yeah, you too, man. Legend.
Yeah.